Hey everyone, it's Joe. I hope you're doing well. Today we are talking about all things fountain pens, which has been a highly requested topic to talk about. But before we get started, I actually want to do a little disclaimer. I have been a casual fountain pen user for a few years already, but I'm still learning. So if there's a few things that I get a little bit mixed up with, I hope you're all right with that. But I've also enlisted some help from various friends within the community who are, I would say, fountain pen experts. So they will be popping in throughout the video to talk about their experience and give us a few tips about their fountain pens and what is good to look out for as a new fountain pen user. Okay, let's get started. So what is a fountain pen? In the simplest definition, a fountain pen is some sort of writing instrument that uses a metal nib to apply water-based ink to paper. The only difference from this definition to any other pen that you've used is that there's no ball mechanism that's helping that metal nib apply the water-based ink to the paper. So a fountain pen is really similar to earlier dip pens, but a dip pen doesn't have an internal ink reservoir and fountain pens do. But I should also mention that although you've seen dip pens in movies or you've seen calligraphy nibs or nib holders, the nibs on those earlier dip pens and those calligraphy nibs are vastly different from the fountain pen nibs you see in modern fountain pens, because calligraphy nibs are designed to flex and give you line variation when you put some pressure on the nib. Whereas fountain pens don't do that. There are some fountain pens that are called flex nib fountain pens that give you that line variation, but that's a really small subset of fountain pens, and most common fountain pens that you'll probably encounter as casual users don't regularly flex like calligraphy nibs. So that's one thing that I should probably stress, because when I was going into this hobby, I thought that all fountain pens had flex in them, and I've never really broken any fountain pens, but before I started learning about fountain pens, I thought that was a property that fountain pens had. But maybe that's just me, but I thought I would stress that because I know some people might have a similar like preconceived notion about fountain pens. But regular fountain pens do not usually flex and give you different line variation that calligraphy nibs do. When you write with a fountain pen, you are using gravity and capillary action to move the ink in the internal ink reservoir of the pen, and using the feed in the fountain pen to move the ink from that reservoir onto the nib. And the feed of the fountain pen actually looks pretty complex. It actually looks like little gills or little ridges that are on the underside of a fountain pen, and it brings and draws the ink from the reservoir onto the metal nib. This is in sharp contrast to ballpoint pens, which are pretty common pens that I hope all of us have kind of used at some point in our lives. Ballpoint pens use a rolling ball mechanism at the tip of the pen, and it disperses the very thick and viscous oil-based ink inside ballpoint pens. So instead of having the gravity and capillary action of a feed, a ballpoint pen just uses a rolling ball mechanism to disperse that ink onto the page. I feel like ballpoints have a pretty smooth writing experience, but they also tend to dry up faster, and it tends to be a little bit messy sometimes because the ink on the end of the ballpoint usually gums up the pen, and then you kind of have to do that weird thing where you scratch the pen on the side of the page to get it flowing again, which is not to say that, you know, fountain pens are much more of a smooth sailing writing experience, but each type of pen has its own kind of drawbacks. There's also another type of pen that's kind of like in between ballpoints and fountain pens, which are rollerballs. Rollerballs have similar water-based inks inside of them, so they flow like fountain pens, but rollerballs still have that ball mechanism at the point of the pen, and that's how it disperses the ink from the ink reservoir onto the page. And then you might be wondering, where does gel ink fall into this? So gel ink is obviously just a type of ink, but it still uses a ball mechanism at the tip of the pen, but the ink inside is obviously a gel-based ink rather than an oil-based ink, which kind of makes the writing experience a little bit more smooth because the gel ink flows a little bit better than the more viscous oil-based ink. Well, that's enough yapping from me. Let's listen to some solid advice from fellow friends and pen experts. First up, we have Kelly from Kelly Love Letters, the funny and super charismatic co-host of the Stationery Cafe podcast. Kelly also works at Ablation, which is an awesome stationery store in Portland, and she is super qualified to talk about fountain pens, and she is also one of the main reasons why I also got back into fountain pens earlier this year. So we have Kelly to thank for that. Let's listen to Kelly's advice.
Hello, lovely people. My name's Kelly. My Instagram is Kelly Love Letters. I am a co-host of the Stationery Cafe podcast with April. And Job asked me to be on here today to talk a little bit about my beginner/newbie fountain pen tips. So my first thing that I thought of is actually ink related. And my advice is to start with 1 or 2 small bottles of ink. So I'm thinking J. Urban or just Urban makes these 10 milliliter bottles. They also make 30 ml bottles that both of these are this is about $6 US. This is about $13 US, depending. That's how we have it at Oblation, which is where I work. Price depending on retailer you go to. Also, I had this out. This is a Sailor Ink Studio. This is only 20 mils, so there's like 10, 20, 30. I recommend for new people to not buy 50 ml bottles until you kind of get like ink samples or smaller bottles so you like know what you like. To this day, I still do that. I bought a 50 ml bottle of De Atramentis Lily of the Valley because I got this Lily of the Valley pen. Not the one that Job has, but a different one. And I don't really like it, and I have a whole bottle of it. I'm like, cool. So my other tip is, of course, I know this is not possible for everyone, but you should hold and feel the pens before you buy them. Like I said, if you're not near a shop like Oblation or, Dromgold's in Texas or, any sort of stationery store that has access to be able to feel and like uncap, feel how it is in your hand. I know that's not realistic for a lot of people. So in that case, I do recommend like this. I mean, this is a Pilot Kakuno. It's got a little smiley face on the nib. And these, I think, retail for about $15-ish US, depending on where you shop. This one you can get on Goulet. These are the Gin House Sharks. These are like under $5 for a pen. And I think they all have, hey, is this one different than my other one? I'm kind of tripping out now. It comes with a converter, standard international cartridge. It's hard to go wrong. With that being said, I think the Gin House Shark can sometimes have problems. Not pictured here as a Platinum Preppy, which is also a $5 pen that I also recommend a lot. There's also like the Kaweco Sport. These are about $25. So this is slightly more. I do understand when you're a newbie that you don't want to go like shelling out all this money for all these pens. So that's why I do recommend these guys. Also Platinum Preppy. Also a little bit more is Pilot Metropolitan for about $25, but it is a metal pen. I have one, but I actually don't like it. But a lot of people do like it. It's just totally dependent on like what kind of weight you like. Just be aware that not all nibs are the same. Extra fine, fine, medium, broad, 1.1 stub, and then all the other crazy nibs. You don't necessarily know when you're starting what you like. I kind of started with mediums. I went into like extra fine fines, and now I'm kind of back into the medium. That's why you can have so many pens, because there's so many different nibs. And anyway, I don't, Job just wanted me to do a couple of little tips. Oh, the last one. Okay. You don't have to write in calligraphy. People say that at my job all the time. They're like, oh, I want one of these, but I don't do calligraphy. I'm like, I don't do calligraphy. I just write like a normal person. So the sky's the limit. Don't feel too overwhelmed. Yes, I have gold nib pens that are very fancy, but I also still regularly write with like, you know, these, what am I trying to find? These guys. I thought I had one more. Yep. I have 3 of these. So, you know, you can't go wrong. And happy penning, and thank you for watching.
Thank you, Kelly. Let's listen to the other host of the Stationery Cafe podcast, the one and only April of Penguins Creative. She is the queen of stationery and a lovely stationery streamer, and also is extremely qualified because she also works for Designville USA. So let's listen to April and her tips.
Hello, this is April. My tip for buying fountain pen as a beginner is that you shouldn't take the size of the nibs for granted, because based on different brands, they actually differ, despite saying that they're fine nibs or medium fine nibs or broad nibs. Specifically, you can generally think of Japanese brand fountain pens as having a more refined nib size, whilst Twisby Eco that uses European nibs or Pelican tend to go a little bit bigger. For example, you have Pilot, which is a Japanese brand, with the fine nib looking way thinner than Twisby Eco's fine nibs. In fact, I would compare Twisby Eco's fine to a Japanese medium. And if you look at Twisby Eco's medium compared to a Japanese medium, it actually is a little bit broader than that. So next time when you're thinking about buying a fountain pen, make sure to compare the nib size across different brands. There's always online resources that compares each individual nib size within the same brand. And so make sure to kind of cross-reference that. Otherwise, you might end up with a nib size that you think is fine, but ends up looking a little bit more medium or fine instead of a medium.
Thank you, April. Let's fly halfway across the world and chat with Unisse of Sushi X Uni and Sushi Plans on Twitch and Instagram to hear her tips. Sushi, or Unisse as I like to call her, is the master fountain pen collector and ink collector. She has an amazing collection, and it's always fun to pick her brain about all the different pen releases and to hear how she uses her various fountain pens and inks in her day-to-day life as an assistant prof.
Hello, Unisse here. Most of your pens will actually come with cartridges if they're not a piston filler, vacuum filler, or an eyedropper pen. So you would actually need to use either a cartridge or a converter. So sometimes you don't really want to buy a lot of these because it's not environmentally friendly. Once you use them, you throw them out. So you would actually opt for a converter to help you minimize the waste. But the converters actually have usually smaller ink capacity compared to cartridges. So one tip is you can actually get a blunt syringe or buy a blunt syringe and actually clean this out and fill it with any bottled ink that you may like.
Thank you, Unisse. Next up, we have Renz of Pen Traveler, and Renz is actually a good friend of mine based in Vancouver. He is a stationery collector and also a bigger fountain pen collector. He is a PhD candidate and also a woodwind musician. He is incredibly talented, and he has also the fanciest pens ever. His collection is so cool and so fancy. Let's hear from Renz.
Hi. So my advice for beginner fountain pen users and like people who want to get into fountain pens, I think is to reach out to people and talk to people and really get into the community side of it, because that's, you know, being enabled and talking to people. So I think that's one of the most fun things about collecting fountain pens, is really being able to share this passion with other people. And, you know, there's a lot of places where you can go to talk to people about this now. There's Instagrams, there's YouTube, there's Facebook, Reddit, different website forums, all that kind of stuff. A lot of places where you can really ask people questions. So, you know, there's so many different ways to get into fountain pens. There's a lot of different price points and different brands, different kinds of fountain pens, from modern to vintage. There's, you know, the list is endless, and there's so many things you can do, so many different kinds of fountain pens that you can explore. So really talk to people, see what they like. You know, maybe some of the things that they like you'll like, and you'll get to know what you don't like. And, you know, it's a lot of fun, and the community, I think, is absolutely incredible. And yeah, so just talk to people, go out there, have fun, find what you like, and yeah, happy writing.
Thank you, Renz. And last but not least, we have our lovely friend Toasty Treat, aka Arielle. I always like to call her Toasty or Toasty Treat because it's such a cute username, but Arielle is a fantastic stationery streamer on Twitch. She's actually a chemist by day and also a writer. She's so multi-talented, but she also is so knowledgeable about fountain pens and inks, and has a massive collection of fountain pens and inks. I was actually inspired to get my first Sailor because of her extensive collection, but let's hear some advice from Arielle or Toasty Treat.
Hi, my name is Arielle. I'm also known as Toasty Treat pretty much everywhere on the internet. But one of the things I wanted to share with y'all is that something that I wish someone would have told me when I was first starting to get into fountain pens, and that is to not be afraid of bottled ink. So I know it's kind of expensive to get into. For a really long time, I was just using cartridges because I liked being able to kind of have the convenience of switching colors and bring a cartridge with me if I was out and about and stuff like that. But it wasn't until I really got into bottled ink that I realized how much I really like the hobby, because there's so much variety that you get with bottled ink that you don't get with cartridges, and so many different like ink properties and all these things that you can do with the inks. If bottled ink is a little bit out of your price range, or you're afraid you don't want to commit to an entire bottle, you can also buy ink samples from like Goulet and Van Ness and stuff like that, and that really helps you kind of get an idea of what kind of inks you like, or maybe what brands you like, or what properties you like of ink. And that was one of the things that really sparked my interest in the hobby, past just buying that initial fountain pen and like pack of cartridges. And one of the things that I also suggest is like going to meetups. Be social if that is something that is open to you. Go to pen club meetups, or go to pen shows, or even join online communities. There's so many good ones. And don't be afraid to ask questions and share your problems and gain knowledge from these people, because that's how I really learned so much about fountain pens and inks, was just by asking questions. And pen people, in my experience, are super open and super helpful and super informative, and there's never really a dumb question. So I really suggest doing things like that. I also suggest before you go out and buy, do your research and buy a really expensive pen that you've had your eye on, buy cheaper pens with different nib sizes and try to get an idea of what kind of nib size you're going to really like, and pair it with different inks with different properties, because what you like in a ballpoint or a rollerball or a gel pen, you may not have that same experience with a fountain pen, because you like these super pastel inks and they don't work in that extra fine nib that you normally like. So you need these super expressive broad inks to work with those pastel inks that you've fallen in love with and stuff like that. And you're gonna save yourself a lot of money in the long run if you kind of buy a couple cheaper pens at that lower price point. And it also just gives you experience, like working on those pens and maintaining them and cleaning them, and you're a little less afraid to take apart a $5 or a $10 pen than maybe like a $400 or $500 pen. So it's a really great way to experiment with these pens without breaking the bank. And I really think that as you gain that knowledge and experience, that's when it's time to, if that's something that you want to do. And not everyone, you don't have to feel pressured ever to move on to a more expensive pen or a gold nib pen if you like what you have. And I think some people feel that pressure of like, oh, I have to like take this next step, and you don't. It's all about what works for you and what you like and what you enjoy. And one of the things you get from experimenting and trying different things is really honing in on what you like and enjoy. And what you like and enjoy from the beginning may not be what you like and enjoy 3 or 4 years from now, because that's what happened to me. I went from super, super extra fine nibs to super, super broad and wet nibs because my taste changed. And don't be surprised if your taste changed too, and just roll with it and learn and explore. And I hope you have a great time with your fountain pen journey, and I hope this was helpful and informative to you. See you around.
Thank you, Toasty. And last but not least, it's me. Just kidding. But I actually have a few tips and tricks that I wanted to talk about and just to chat with you all. Hey everyone, welcome to the chatty portion of this video. I just want to talk about all of my fountain pens briefly, as well as give a few tips and tricks about fountain pens that I've learned during my fountain pen journey. So I've been using fountain pens for a few years, but I've recently just gotten back into it again. So I think I should probably start this whole conversation with my first fountain pen, because this is my Lamy Safari. This is the Vista, which is a demonstrator pen, which is just a fancy way to say it's a clear pen. And this was my introductory pen to the fountain pen world, and it's actually a common first fountain pen for a lot of people. But my first tip and piece of advice is to just buy the cheapest fountain pen out there, just to see if you even like writing with a fountain pen. This is not that cheap. This is $30. Within the pen world, it might be relatively cheap, but for a lot of us, and even for me up to this day, $30 is still quite a bit for a writing utensil, because I'm used to getting a gel pen for $3, which is already a little bit more expensive than other pens, right? So this is $30, but I think the cheapest fountain pen out there is probably the Jinhao Shark, or even I don't know how much a Platinum Preppy costs, but those are under $10, maybe even under $5. I'm not quite sure. But I do want to try those out because I want to see how they work. But this was my first pen, and it was relatively cheap within the fountain pen world, but I really recommend this as a starter pen too. This is the Pilot Kakuno. I got this shortly after. This is a Japanese made pen by Pilot, and this is actually marketed to students, and it actually has a lovely little smiley face on the nib. But I like this because the nib is fantastic. I really enjoy it. But yeah, I got this first, and then I got these over the years, but I have 5 of those Lamy Safaris. These ones you've probably seen on the channel. These are the 2021 limited edition colorways. These are my 2 favorite colors. 2 of my favorite colors. This is the kind of burnt sienna color, and this is an olive green. I absolutely love it. This was the 2020 special edition. This is the mango color. Also, these 3 are actually my 3 fave colors in general, so I'm glad that I have my fave colors represented in fountain pens, and then I just have the white one, which I've been loaning to my sister. And these are all with a medium nib, but the fun thing with these pens is that you can easily just swap these nibs out, and you can do it as long as you're holding it gently. You can change these nibs out, and you can buy them relatively cheap, and you just have to be gentle with it so you don't crush the feed. But yeah, a lot of people just tinker around with these pens, and it's a solid pen. I know some people are not the most fond of Lamys, but if you like the writing experience, you like the writing experience, and I happen to like the writing experience with the medium nibs that I have. And that brings us to a second tip, I guess. don't be afraid to like try different nib sizes because they vary like a lot. There's like extra fine, fine, medium, broad, double broad. There's also like ultra extra fine, because I think a lot of people, if you're transitioning from the world of like gel pens, in the world of gel pens, I feel like the finer the tip or the nib, the better. So a lot of people really enjoy a fine writing experience, and fountain pens, are not always the most fine writers. But a lot of people try like a finer nib, but tries, you might like a thicker nib. I hated 0.7 nib pens, and this Sarasa is a 0.5, which is also kind of thick. Like I love the 0.38 millimeter nib, especially like the Muji ones. That's the one that I really liked using when I was in school. But yeah, it's fun trying out different nibs, and I think when you get into the hobby, a lot of people focus on the pens, but in reality, a large part of the hobby and like trying fountain pens is actually the inks, and some inks have different like properties to them. So some inks have shimmer. So this one is a Ferris wheel press ink, and this actually has like legit gold glitter on it, or in it, and yeah, when you write, you have a lovely like rose gold ink with some legit gold flecks and glitter and shimmer in it. So this is called a shimmering ink. There's also inks that are called shading inks. So there's like a property to these pens that when you write, there's like some sort of variation in the color based on I guess like how much of the ink is on the paper. So there's some inks like this, like Neko Yanagi, that some parts look a little bit lighter, but then like the ink pools up a little bit and it looks darker, and you see like a shift in color. It's not color shifting, but it's just because of the ink kind of like stacking on top of each other when it's drying. There's just more density of ink in that like specific spot, thus attributing to like a more intense color. And then there's also like shading, that's what a shading ink is. And then there's sheening inks. So some inks have certain properties where there's a color shift if you kind of like hold it to a certain light. So this flaming blue Robert Osser ink has a little bit of like, it's blue, but it sheens to purple. It's kind of like those fabrics that you see at like a fabric store, or like, I don't know, like dresses or even like ties. A lot of like formal wear has like, sheening fabrics where it has like one color, but if you move it like a certain angle, the light catches it in a certain way and it looks like a different color. So the fabric might look like yellow, but when you tilt it ever so slightly and the light hits it a little bit differently, you see a little bit of red or pink. That's the same thing with sheening ink. So sheening, shading, and shimmer, it's all S words, and it's, I might have butchered it, but there's like, I think that's the rough gist of it. So like shading just means like, you see different shades. Sheening means you legit see a different sheen. And then shimmer is just like shimmer. You see glitter or like shimmery flecks that are shiny. So this is the ink that I was just showing you earlier. But yeah, that's, I think, my second tip. And then my last tip, I guess, is just to be adventurous. Like if you are really into fountain pens, I think just like be adventurous with the different brands that you try, because I know there's a lot of people who get stuck with trying different brands, but it's really fun trying out different fountain pen brands and manufacturers, because they all make their nibs very differently, and then there's also very different styles. So this pen is a demonstrator pen just like this one, but it looks super different, and this has a different filling mechanism. So this has a converter, so you can use like bottled ink, but it can also take, a cartridge. I mean, this cartridge is this is a short international cartridge. They make like a larger cartridge, which is just called the standard cartridge. And then different companies also make their own proprietary or like brand specific cartridges that only fit their pens. But this pen takes like a converter, which is just a fancy way to say a contraption that allows you to use bottled ink instead of these cartridges. But it also takes cartridges as well. But this other pen, this one's a TWSBI Diamond 580. This is a piston fill pen. So this has a piston that you spin or twist to draw this ink up into the body, and you can't you can take it apart, but it's not as easy as taking this apart. And this has a different filling mechanism, even though they have, a similar-ish aesthetic, that they're both clear demonstrator pens. But this is, a different make altogether and has a different filling mechanism. And the nibs are also different. Like this one has a medium nib as well, but this medium nib from this company might be different from this company. So that's one thing to keep in mind. And yeah, just to play around with it. I'll quickly list all of the pens that I have. I have these 5 Lammies. These are my TWSBI Ecos. So these are a little bit cheaper than the Diamond 580. So there's 3 of those. And then I have the new TWSBI Swipe, which is about like the $30 range. And this one's fantastic too. These are piston fills. And then this one takes cartridges or converters, just like these guys. And then I have my Kawecos or Kawecos. It's a German brand that makes like these smaller pocket pens that they're known for. These are the sport pens. This is the Alsports. It's made with aluminum, and this one's a little bit pricier. But then these ones are just the regular sport, and they're about $30. These are also a common like introductory pen, or like a common like starter pen, like the Lammies. My workhorse pen, the one that I always bring to work, is the Pilot Prera, which has the same nib as the Pilot Kakuno, and I absolutely love this nib, even though it's on this much cheaper pen. But this is cooler, it's smaller, it's sleek, it's a demonstrator pen, so it's clear and you can see the guts of the pen. And I just love the nibs on these. And then when you get to, this is one of the newer acquisitions of mine. This is more of like an art pen in terms of fountain pens. Like this is a brand that I don't really know much, but this is a collaboration with Hank's Diary or Hours Studio in collaboration with Artex, which is the brand that makes this fountain pen. So this is Hank's Diary or Hours Studio's design on this Artex pen. And yeah, this is my first pen that I bought really for like the aesthetic of it, because I love Lily of the Valley and navy blue so much lately, and it's actually all because of this pen. But I absolutely love this pen and will treasure it forever because it's such a beautiful looking pen. And then this is my priciest pen, and this is my first pen that has a gold nib. So all of these other pens have a steel nib. This has a gold nib, and this is from Sailor. This is the Sailor Pro Gear Slim Mini from the Morocco line. This is the Night Sky, so it has a lovely navy blue body with the subtle like silvery and gold flecks in it. And this is a pocket pen just like this, so it's tiny, but it's postable. And this one has this one and these Ecos. These are like a twist cap, and this post, so that just means that the pen cap can go onto the pen body. So you might hear that in like fountain pen talk. But yeah, this posts onto this, and it makes it a nice size for me. And I actually really like smaller pocket pens. But yeah, that's like pretty much my collection. I think I might have an odd one, not here because it's in a planner pen loop, but these are my main daily pens. And that pretty much concludes this extremely long video about fountain pens. If you don't own any fountain pens, I hope this has convinced you, or at least kind of piqued your interest into getting into fountain pens. It's such a fun hobby, and it's really accessible. If you want to make it accessible for yourself, you can get cheaper pens, you can get more expensive pens. It really depends on you and your comfort level and your budget. But I hope you learned something. If not, I hope you just had fun hanging out and meeting some of my talented friends. Be sure to check out everyone's social media links down below. I will be back again with another video, but again, please let me know what you'd like to watch and what topics you'd like me to talk about next time. Okay, I'll see you all. Take care, everyone. Stay safe. Bye-bye. Okay, try it and then tell me how you like it.
It's alright. It is kind of smooth.
Do you like this better than the other Lamy that you tried, the white fountain pen?
Maybe.
How much do you think this pen is?
No,
just guess.
50?
Okay, it's
What?
not.
How much is this?
It's like 225.
Mic drop.